Morning, glory, and evening grace, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Welcome. Normally, Ben Domenech, Fox News contributor and editor-at-large for The Spectator, is my Friday guest, but he's out of pocket tomorrow. So I want to talk to him today about this remarkable week that has been since I last spoke with him, and also to congratulate him on the imminent arrival. Not imminent. I'm not sure when baby boy Domenech is going to show up in the world, but that was announced yesterday. And I listened to your podcast today, Ben, and apparently the names have to be a little bit Western coded, a little bit country. So I looked up all the names in the Louis L'Amour series that Ike read during World War II. And we've got Terrell, William Tell Sackett, Orrin Sackett, Parmalee Sackett, Ethan Sackett, Echo Sackett, and Joe Sackett. On the countryside, how about Luke? I'm just don't know.
Hugh, well, you're a good egg for doing that. I'm more of a Zane Grey guy than a Louis L'Amour guy, but my wife likes Louis L'Amour, so I will make that note to her. So, look, it's been an incredible week, and I didn't want to miss it, even though I'm going to be in Arizona tomorrow, and so I was not able to join you in the normal window. But look, I am just blown away by the amount of news to handle this week. I mean, we had, so much on our plate to talk about. Where do you want to start?
Well, I want to start by asking you a question that not many people have been talking about. How do you think the Iranian regime feels? I know how America felt on 9/12. I imagine I know pretty much what Israel felt like on 10/8. But now we're in the week after a crushing defeat of a regime that has been ruthlessly in power for 46 years, revealed to just be a throne of lies. What do you think the regime elites are thinking right now?
I think the regime elites right now are trying to figure out where they're going to run to. I mean, quite honestly, it's a situation that I think they never thought they would be facing, and I think that it's one that has look. Some of these things, it's one of those situations, Hugh, where things change not all then all at once. And I think that in this case, this was such a shock to the system, such an unexpected result in terms of the outcome, such an unexpected problem for the regime, because I think that they really thought that they had a lot more time. I think that they thought that they could play the same game with this administration that they've played with administrations prior. And they discovered, to their shock, that this was not the case, and that in reality, what we see here is a situation where our allies, namely Israel in this context, have the capability to clear the path for America to do something. And under President Trump, they are willing to do things that other presidents would not do, and to take risks, by the way. And that's part, I think, of the chip on the shoulder that people like Pete Hegseth and others have about this operation, is everyone seems to be acting as if it was a foregone conclusion that it would work. That this would be something that would be functionally able to achieve the American aims without risk of life to any American soldier, to any American bomber, to anyone. And that's not the case at all, Hugh.
No, the last time we tried something in Iran was Desert One in 1979, and it ended up with helicopters crashing in the desert.
Not a foregone conclusion at all. And so
right.
I think part of the reason that you hear the irritation in Pete Hegseth's voice today, talking about the media and talking about the way this is being covered, it's not just about the fact that that CNN, in a way that I think is very inappropriate, and I'm glad that some other people in the media who are not necessarily big Trump fans, Mark Halperin was calling it out this morning, other people are calling it out as well, to run with this low information, immediate turnaround intel report to claim that the president was lying about the effectiveness of this, it's not just about that. It's about the fact that the media seems to be so ignorant of the risks involved in this, of the monumental display of American force that went into this, that they aren't even willing to give the president credit or his administration credit or the people who wear the uniform credit. And that's something that I think is just...
Well, the damning indictment, Ben, it's in regime media. Regime media is using the CNN report to tell their captive population that what they saw they didn't really see, and the Americans didn't destroy the nuclear program. So the only people CNN hurt are the people of Iran who want to be free. And I really think that was the most irresponsible thing. But after watching, and I played a bunch of it in hour one, General Kane's discussion today, how can anything's working in Fordo, and who wants to go in there to find out?
Yeah, I'm sorry. You want to sign up? Not Bertrand, if you want to go parachute in there and then look underneath the ground and decide for yourself, I mean, be my guest. But it's one of these situations where, look, we have dealt with this regime for so long. We know how willing they are to lie. We know how willing they are to lie to their own people. We know how much their persistence as a regime depends on those lies, depends on the narrative that they tell their people, and how much they work very hard to keep them from knowing the truth. And in this instance, I think, unfortunately, the knee-jerk reaction, as it always is with anything that Donald Trump does, is to turn around and say, well, he must be lying. He cannot be telling us the truth about this. And I think that in this case, look, every bit of evidence that we have, including from our friends around the globe and their own international intelligence services, we can say this operation, if it did not completely obliterate this nuclear program, it sent it back to the Stone Age. And they're going to be trying to rebuild it again, of course, because that's what they always do. But I think that this does provide a window, perhaps, for some kind of negotiation, for some kind of reconsideration that opens up the possibility that we might actually have something change there more fundamentally beyond just the nuclear program.
Now I want you to compare and contrast, Ben, the mullahs and the theocratic elites with the never-Trumpers. Both have enormous sunk costs in the prior positions that they've taken, from which they find it very difficult to walk away, even though everything in the world. I listened to, I've long enjoyed the writing of David Frum, though he's lost his mind over Trump. And I listened to his podcast yesterday, and he's explaining how the success of Donald Trump makes him even more dangerous as a dictator in waiting. I mean, it's just.
Oh, Lord.
Right before he interviews Tina Brown.
You can do that. When I hear
Life's
something
too short.
Stupid, I have to turn things off.
Well, they're trapped. Like the Iranian regime is trapped in a mirage about the world, and they can't get out of it. And Trump no longer cares about them. Nobody cares about them anymore. But I don't know how they get back, and I don't know how the mullahs reconstitute a regime that anyone believes.
Look, I read the New Yorker, I read the New York Times, I read occasionally the Washington Post, so that's a little harder. I read Politico, I read all these places, and even David Frum's podcast. That's just a bridge too far from me. But the thing that I will say is you are completely correct about the sunk costs associated with this. And the fact that they won't respond to a decision that, quite frankly, there were people who were writing about Donald Trump in 2015, 2016 as a Lindberghian figure, as someone who was going to be, prostrating himself before the dictators of the world, as someone who would be unwilling to stand up for America's friends. And instead, what do we have today? We have the majority of NATO being willing to actually spend what they promised to spend and beyond for a very long time. They've avoided doing that. And we have an Iranian regime that is back on its heels and potentially has an opening that we, perhaps never would have seen. I mean, I certainly didn't know that we would see this within my lifetime. But I do think that this is a situation where if you can't reevaluate after this week the way that you talk about this president and his foreign policy, about his devotion to American national security and interests in a way that is responsible, you should just shut up and just stop. I mean,
it's an exit that you can take. It's got a big exit sign over it, which says, okay, I have my problems with Trump, but let me just make it clear this was in the America's best interest, and I salute the president and the men and women of our military, and we're going to celebrate that. Let me play for you for a moment a NATO moment yesterday that Dwayne just dug up for me. Let's play Donald Trump and Marco Rubio, the daddy question.
Mark Rutte, the NATO chief, who is your friend, he called you daddy earlier. Do you regard your NATO allies as kind of children?
No, he likes me. I think he likes me. If he doesn't, I'll let you know. I'll come back and I'll hit him hard, okay? No?
Do you see Rubio is laughing behind him, Ben Domenech. 30 seconds of the break.
Look, I think that was one of the funniest things I've ever seen on the international stage. It was absolutely hilarious. I would have had the exact same response that Marco Rubio did. And look, this is I actually think that reporter was kind of getting a kick out of it. I think she was glad she got to ask that question before somebody else did. But it was very entertaining to see. But again, this is just how much his relationship with the world and with those European leaders has changed from the first term. And I think it's a very good benefit to us and to the world to see that happen.
I'm going to talk with Ben during the break. We'll put it on tomorrow, the Big Weekend Pod, and then when we come back, we're going to talk about the sorry state of New York and the very, very sorry city of New York City when we come back. But during the break, got some other stuff to talk to him about. Don't miss. I am back with Ben Domenech. Ben, when we come back from break on the network, I'll be talking to you about Mr. Mamdani. But in the meantime, when President Trump walked out on Friday night, he had Vice President Vance on his right, Secretary Rubio, Secretary Hegseth on his left. I immediately thought those three guys can run for president, along with Cotton, Pompeo, Elise, a whole bunch of Doug Burgum. We got a bench. The Democrats do not have a bench.
Yes, I mean, I think that's absolutely true. But I also think this is a situation where we should appreciate that is not a foregone conclusion in terms of the way that this nation is currently going. And we'll obviously come back and have a conversation about what's taking place in New York. But we shouldn't just assume that this is an automatic situation where one of these people is just going to automatically emerge. It's going to be a fight, and I think that the American people can certainly see right now that there's one side that is more serious, but the other situation that I think has to be considered right now is that this is not a situation where you can just count your chickens before they've hatched. You have to actually win the argument. And I think that we've seen the kind of skill that these guys have in a clear-eyed view that understands the world and how ridiculous the other side is, but you still have to earn it. And so I think that one of the things that worries me about this current moment is that I think there are a lot of people who are kind of standing on the results of this past election as if it's something that ends an argument. And I don't think it does at all.
Oh, it doesn't. And in fact, we got Mike Rogers up in Michigan, but we got to figure out how to get Tom Tillis over the line in North Carolina. Susan Collins should win handily in Maine. But we need a candidate in Georgia. We need a candidate maybe in Nevada. I'm not sure. I think there's a seat out there that's in play. We have to recruit. Mitch McConnell used to say, whenever I had to go over to the Senate, first thing you got to win. And that means candidate recruitment. And it also means, and this is the last question before you go back, do you think the big, beautiful bill gets to the president's desk by July 4? That's 8 days away.
I think that's a steep climb. I would be surprised if it does. It will get to the desk, but a big thing to learn from the last time around when they were trying to get this stuff passed in 2017 is that it came in so late that you didn't have really the argument to make to the American people into the midterm election about the benefits of the economic policy that you had. People didn't have the time to see the results. And I think that the president and his team are very confident with the results of what this bill would produce in terms of economic growth, in terms of its impact on the family, in particular, working families across America would benefit from this. But I think that they need to get it across to the president's desk as soon as possible so that they can start running on it, because it's everything that they've been claiming to stand for a long time combined in a big package that they need to get passed.
They absolutely, if they could by July 4th, there's a chance they could save the House. Otherwise, the title charts of American politics are not good for the Republicans in 2026. All right, I'm coming right back with Ben on the other side. Stay tuned. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. The only good news coming out of New York City this week is that we are alert to the perils of ranked voting, which is a mess in Maine, and it's a mess in New York, and nobody saw this coming. But Ben Domenech, just hold forth a little bit on what Mamdani means for the Democrats and for the national political scene.
So I'm going to invoke my wife here because she, unlike me, lived in New York basically since her college days back at Columbia for about 2 decades. And she was very early on to this Mamdani figure, even when people were saying, "Oh, it's impossible that he could win," and advising everyone around her, absolutely he could. And I think a part of that, too, by the way, is that she pays attention to Instagram and TikTok a lot more than I do. She was right. And she thinks that he can win in the fall, too. And she doesn't think that it's at all a foregone conclusion that this is a beneficial situation for Eric Adams to hold on or for New York to do something that is actually sane. This is totally crazy. It's lunatic. I mean, it's off. I mean, this guy makes Bill de Blasio look like a Republican. I mean, it's true. But here's the thing that I think we should understand. He does have a serious following and a base of support among a cadre of people who are now in much higher positions of power and relevance within the American left than what we've seen them have in the past. Do you know who Stavros Halkias is, Hugh?
No.
Stavros is part of the name. I can't actually say the name of the podcast because it would be an FCC violation.
Okay, good. Please don't. Good.
So, but he is someone who is a leading voice on the American left. He is a comedian, a very funny one, in fact. And he came out and endorsed Mamdani and made a big play for him, as did Emily Ratajkowski, as did all these other celebrities, as did all these different Brooklyn figures who speak for the community, as did AOC. It's a combination of people who I think are thought of incorrectly by a lot of older voters as being youngsters, whippersnappers, people who don't speak for an actual cohort, but they do. And in this case, they've spoken with a very loud voice. The ideas that he is espousing are lunatic, but I also think that they truly do have purchase within this current American left, and I don't think they're going away anytime soon. And that's why I say people shouldn't be, resting on their laurels or assuming that the argument's going to be won when it comes to the contest between this type of socialism and the kinds of capitalist pro-business policy, freedom policies that we've seen hold at play, which used to be bipartisan, but now no longer are.
Now, Ben, just ruthless Machiavellian Ben at this point. Do the Republicans want him to win, or do we want Curtis Sliwa, who's been a colleague of mine for 20 years, to step aside and everybody get behind the Eric Adams not so bad movement? Or do we want Mamdani to win in order to see what happens? I mean, we see Chicago. I don't need to see it again, but boy, you can't miss it if it's New York.
Look, I believe that sometimes, as we said, as we say about democracy, the voters get what they want and they get it good and hard. And I think that in this case, the truth is that there are a lot of Republicans who do want him to win, and including, by the way, you said ruthless. Those guys definitely are in that category. They want to see the ramifications of policy actually be put into place. They want to see the government grocery stores. For my own part, because I actually have sympathy for the people of New York, because I have friends who live and work there, I don't want to see that because I don't want to be in a situation where we're having to go in and clean up the kind of mess. Civilization can be lost pretty quickly if you don't stand up for it and fight for it. And
I went to New York for the first time in 1980 as an adult and having to get a job in an apartment, and that was pretty much near the bottom of the first New York bottom. And then Giuliani came along, and then Bloomberg, and then it became a wonderful place to go to. And when I was working for NBC, I loved going up there and going to 30 Rock and running around from the Village up to the Upper West Side. It was great fun. Now again, I think it's going to be a disastrous thing, but a disastrous thing that we cannot not watch. Now, tell me about the implication. Is he? He's obviously an anti-Zionist. Is he an anti-Semite?
He certainly codes that way, and I think he plays into that. And the ideas that he's espoused, just in his own Twitter feed and things of that nature, are things that certainly indicate that he's in that category. I can't speak to a guy's heart, but I certainly see where he is on the spectrum when it comes to these issues. And the idea that if Bibi Netanyahu comes to New York to speak at the UN, that he's going to have him arrested, I take that very seriously. I take it.
Wait, he said that?
Yes, he has said that. He has said that he believes he should be arrested as a war criminal. And
wow.
So it's, look, this is one of these things where you're dealing, again, he makes Bill de Blasio look like a Republican. I'm not kidding.
I just don't understand. Maybe it's because our public school system has condemned a generation of young adults to political illiteracy and historical agnosticism. But we've seen this show before a lot of times in a lot of places around the world. It doesn't work.
Nope, it never works. There's always
a
to it, and I think Democrats are playing with fire with this guy.
And does that help us politically if, in fact, it comes to fruition? By us, I mean Republicans, and it's a nightmare. Last question: if it's a nightmare, as we expected,
I think it's a nightmare. Opposite argument, and not just assume that things are going to go their way.
All right, Ben Domenech, we're losing you. Thank you, buddy. I appreciate having a great week off, and I appreciate you joining me early so we can get your insights into this week. Follow Ben at B Domenech. His Big Ben podcast is a joy, although I have to begin to get a trigger warning about Pacers talk. There was more Pacers talk today. And I feel bad for Halliburton. I mean, no one should go down that way. And that's a really good question you asked. Would you rather have lost in Game 6 or lose them that way in Game 7? I'd have rather lost in Game 6 because that's not an easy to come back from injury, is it?
Answered it the same way, Hugh. I would have answered it the same way. I should choose otherwise.
Yeah. Well, true fans are true fans, but I'm telling you, it's a tough way to go out. Thank you, Ben Domenech.